Hello, friends. Welcome to Soul Care Hour. Tonight we have a themed night. I thought it would be fun to talk about my process with using oracle cards or intuitive kind of development cards and provide a bit of a background, a bit of a workshop so you can take some stuff away from it and use it at your leisure, or if you want to get a reading from someone, these are some things that you can kind of take into consideration or ask your reader kind of their process and have the awareness around, so then you can decide if you're a good match if you don't want to do them yourselves. I always try to empower others to use a tool. I don't want to just be a gatekeeper of information and say, like, you can have this, but you have to pay for it. Or, in the case of like an intuitive reading, like, oh, I'll do the reading. I do want to teach others so that they can do it for themselves, because I've also been taught kind of, I guess, like a foundation or a a framework of how this can kind of work, and then you can start there. And then for me, my process is kind of, I've taken little bits and pieces from different mentors or different people that I've watched and learned from, and just developed my own process so I can share my process. You can start it as framework if this is something you want to try, and then just use your own intuition to kind of develop it as you go, or as you kind of shift. Things might change. I know mine has kind of evolved. um so as always, when we kind of start these workshops, we'll just take a couple deep breaths, just check in with ourselves. This is like a non-negotiable when I do intuitive work, because it brings me out of that ego, that monkey mind, that squirrel on Red Bull brain. It brings me back into my body, because that is when I'm able to sink into that kind of higher consciousness, that intuition, that my soul space. So we'll just take a couple moments, take a few deep breaths, kind of check in with yourself from the day or whatever time you're watching this. And yeah, take an inventory before we start. Sometimes I forget to say that. See where you're at, kind of on a one scale of 1 to 10. Take a few deep breaths, give yourself a little bit of somatic or nervous system support, and then see how you feel after a few deep breaths. If you need to continue on, continue as you listen to me and watch me. If you're watching either the replay in the Living on Lemonade group or as a podcast episode on YouTube. So let's take a couple deep breaths. You can put hand over heart or both if you need some extra somatic support. You can do breathe in and out through your nose. You could breathe out through your mouth if you need an extra like sigh. Feel that those shoulders dropping. You can do eyes open, eyes closed, however that feels. Biggest thing, as I always say, just make sure that exhale is longer than your inhale. If you want to really come into that relaxation, it gives those signals to your body that you are not in any sort of stress response. So it kind of lets your body know, like, we're okay to sink in and relax. All right, we'll give it a couple moments here. Okay. So I guess I'll just start with a little bit of background. Now, if you're watching on the video, I received these two decks when I was about 12 years old after my friend Nicole died. They are both by Doreen Virtue, who is no longer in like the spiritual world. She denounced spiritualism and all of the things. How so her work is no longer in print. Like you can't buy it in stores. It's no longer being distributed, but you can get it secondhand. She was still doing this work when my mom bought me these decks. At the time, I don't remember her really explaining to me what they were for, so mostly they just sat on my bookshelf. Sometimes I would kind of look at them, but as I found out later, she bought them for me as a tool to help me cope with my grief from losing my friend Nicole. Now, I still love these decks. I haven't pulled them out forever, so it kind of makes me want to work with them. But essentially, I think they're both 44 card decks, which is very common for Oracle decks. Yeah. It's kind of the standard where Oracle is very much like there's not really necessarily like a formula for the types of cards and stuff. There's lots of different themes. There's a million different themes, but I do find a lot of them tend to be like 44 card decks. Not all, but it's very common. So these cards, they just have simple words, and there's just like friendship, study, intention. So there's lots of different ways that we can focus our attention and intentions with when we use oracle cards. I'll talk about tarot too a little bit, but most of my decks are oracle cards. And there's usually when you buy a deck, there's a book. So the author will write descriptions for each card that you can read the description after. Now, I do I do tend, and neither right or wrong, you can go either way. Some people will just like ditch the book right away because they'll say like I want to create my own interpretations of these cards and kind of develop a bit of a relationship with the deck. I know that sounds kind of funny, but if you use cards, you'll know what I mean if you use them regularly. I like when I first get, for me personally, I like reading the descriptions, especially depending on who the author is. There's a lot of like I'll show you Rebecca Campbell's after, but she does so much research and like history on the subject matter of her decks that she tells stories and there's imagery and there's symbolism and um yeah, I love her decks especially. So I like to read them just to kind of like get a bit of that vibe of what she's trying to portray. But at the same time, I start to develop my own kind of signs and symbols with the cards and what it actually means to me. So when I pick up certain cards, I'm like, ah, okay, I get to know them. Now, specifically with these Doreen Virtue ones. There's one that's healing with the angels that I just showed you. The other one's healing with the fairies. So for me, the healing with the angels are very like supportive and nourishing cards. If I need some like a hug and some encouragement, this is a deck that I would pull. And I have other ones that have kind of the same symbolism or the same feeling to me. The healing with the fairies deck for me is it's very like playful. Like if I need a little bit of like inspiration or just some play, I'll choose these cards. So it's interesting how you can have different decks and depending on what your intention and kind of the mood you're in or the type of support or kind of if you need some you want to get curious, you might grab one deck or a different one. That's why I have multiple now. I know that I'm gonna part with some of my decks. I don't always there's some that I don't grab, and maybe it's just the season I'm in, or maybe it's just that I've decided they're not totally for me. This deck was gifted to me. It's called Postcards from Spirit. Now it's really lovely. It's by Colette Baron Reid. There is um there is a little book, but it's not really like your typical ones with the descriptions because each card is a postcard from spirit. So it's literally like a little love letter in a card that gives you a message, gives you encouragement, gives you some love, a little pick me up. And so for these ones, because they are like lots of different colors, I typically tend to spread them out on the floor like a fan and then I pick the color that I'm drawn to, and that's how I choose from this deck. So as I kind of go through some of my decks, I'll give you different ways that you can kind of work with them. And one of the ways that this was kind of the main way I worked with cards with all of my decks, is I would shuffle them until I felt like I was done shuffling, and then I would spread them out on the floor, and then I would pick the ones that I felt drawn to. Now I do a whole different process, which is really interesting. But we evolve as we work with these things, and maybe I'll go back to spreading them out. Who knows? But these are just different ways that you can work with them. You just kind of find the way that works best for you. So this deck's really nice if you need a little bit, just need kind of like a postcard from spirit, a nice little love letter. And this was gifted to me by my sister. What else do I have here? I have one deck, and I already know that this is one that I'm going to study more. This is one that I need to kind of build um, awareness with. It is called a yogic path, and it is very much themed around yogic and like kind of Buddhist, Eastern philosophy type practices, keywords. The artwork is just very beautiful. It's the same illustrator as a few of the other decks that I have. Now she makes her own decks now, but before, I think it's Danielle Noel. I the This deck actually came with like a bigger book. It came in a bigger package, not just like the deck with the card book in the case. So I don't uh, oh, it's kind of like behind some candles and stuff, but it's just a larger book. But this is one where I'm like, I know that there's going to be a season where I'm ready to kind of dive into this. So one is like yamas, and so they also go through the different prana is breath. So a lot of the Sanskrit names goes through a lot of the theory. It There's different, this is one of these I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's one of the chakras. So they have all the chakras in here and their Sanskrit names and stuff. So it's um if you're not familiar with these things, they can be kind of daunting. So this is like a deck where I'm like, there's going to be, when I'm in a season of like wanting to study these more deeply, this is going to be the deck for me. So it's interesting how we sometimes have seasons with our decks as well, depending on what we need. Now, two of the really kind of lighthearted ones that I like, and I use this Sacred Soul Care deck. I was using it a lot kind of in my Facebook community. I was doing like a weekly poll, like a self-care poll. I switched the deck a few weeks ago, so I've been using a different one, but this is a common one that I'll use. And it's also really nice because I don't even really have to use the book, because this is one where I pull a card and I take my own interpretation with them because they're pretty straightforward. There's like make an altar, um, deep. Well, some of them are upside down, just the way it shuffles. Deep breathing. What else we have? Be still. So these are cards you can they're simple, but it brings your attention to whatever subject matter. So this is self-care. So this is like, I'm gonna pick a self-care practice for this week, be intentional, shuffle, and then whatever it is, here's sing. There's just what is it? It is a, I don't think it says how many cards. Oh, this is 55 cards. So not 44, but 55. But it's just another one that's just super. This one says health checkup. So it's just like it brings your awareness to a wide range of things. There's one that's like about money. So it's like maybe this week I'll look at my finances and check in on my budget and things like that. So you can use, one of the things that I love most about oracle cards and these types of kind of intuitive decks is using it as a mindfulness practice, being intentional. Like, what can I learn? What can I pull from this? What can I bring awareness and mindfulness to? Another fun one that's similar to the sacred soul care is this sacred creators, but it's very much the same. It's like these little accept and receive these little inspiration cards, but you can go deeper with them, right? Um, another some decks, I'll get into Rebecca's now. She has 5 decks. I have 4 of hers. One of them I bought and just didn't jive with, so I ended up gifting it to a friend who really loved it. This is the first deck of hers that she made. It's called Work Your Light. Now, when I saw this in the store, I was so drawn to the imagery and the colors, and I was like, I have so many decks, I don't need another one. But I could, for some reason, not leave the store until I bought it. It was so strange. And the same thing happened with one of her other decks. And it turns out this deck I have used, it's hard to see the colors, but I've used it so much that I can pull a card, and I've built those kind of signs and symbols with them that I know exactly. Like there's this one card, I probably wouldn't be able to pull it right away, but it's called Pillar of Light. And every time I would get it, and it's funny because when we're doing this type of work, I found that I would pull some of the same cards over and over and over for a season. And it was like, it was always a reminder. And until I actually listened and kind of fulfilled the intention of it, I would keep getting it. And it was like, oh my God, okay. So there was this one card that for me symbolized like meditation, starting a meditation practice. And, and I knew that I needed to meditate for more. So once I kind of started, or was more mindful of that stuff and checking in with myself, then I kind of stopped pulling that card. So it was it was really cool. And I pull a card every day and I write it down so I can always look back and see like which ones I've been pulling lately. Um, Another thing you can do with the cards is a lot of them will have prompts or kind of like affirmations. So you could use it in a meditation and use it kind of as a mantra if you want. Or with the prompts, you can journal and go deeper and use it as a journaling practice. So these decks are also, you can use them for different mindful kind of introspective practices too. The other decks that I have of hers are the Rose Oracle. So they're very much like flower themed. I'm not going to open um every deck because I have so many of them. The Healing Waters, this was the other one I could not leave the store without. And as it turns out, I ended up using them in the kind of beginning of the year readings that I was doing, and I was like, this deck is absolutely perfect for them. And I was like, I know exactly why I bought it now. I didn't know at the time, and I was pulling cards from it every day for a long time, so I'm pretty well versed with this deck. And then her newest one that just came out that I've just been learning is the Ancient Stones Oracle, and I love that she goes into like the myths and the stories and the um what's the word I want to use, like the history and the like the folklore of different subject matters, and even like the Rose Oracle, like just the stories that she tells in relation to the cards is just so profound. That's one of the reasons I love her decks the most. I have a couple other ones. Sometimes I just pick them because I love the colors and stuff. I also Ocean Dreams. I loved the colors, and she's the illustrator of a couple of Rebecca's decks, as well as this Yogic Path one. And now she has her own decks, which is super cool. And I love water, so I was drawn to the ocean one. And it has more cards, I think. I don't remember how many is. I'm not seeing it right away. And then I've got a couple like other random ones I saw in the store that I thought were really pretty. This one's like crystals, and then this one's called the Pure Magic Oracle. And if you've heard of Kyle Gray, he's kind of like the angel guy. So he's got an angel prayers card. This to me is like this a similar vibe to the Healing with the Angels deck, right? Kind of the same supportive, very nourishing deck. Um, Keepers of the Light is like light keepers. What's an example? I haven't opened these ones in a while. So we've got like Joan of Arc, um, Kal- what is it? Kali Ma? Did I say that right? Lord Ganesh. Um, who else do we got? Holy Spirit. We've got Charity, Gaia, Faith, Isis. So yeah, Keepers of the Light. It's another good one. And he has really nice um like descriptions and stuff too. And then the third one of his, I had a fourth one. I gifted one to my mom. Angels and Ancestors, also very nice. So it just kind of depends on what you're in the mood for, or what type of guidance you're looking for. I also have this Moonology Manifestation Oracle cards. I have also used this to do card readings for people. When kind of this one, I used it at the beginning of, I don't think this year, but last year, kind of setting up intentions for the year. It actually worked really well with like goal setting or where to kind of focus your attention on the year, be it business or just personal. It worked really well for that. So I was super happy. Now, I mentioned tarot really briefly earlier. I do have a couple tarot decks. At this time, I kind of just use them interchangeably as oracle cards. Probably there's people that are really intense about tarot that would like not be happy about that. But tarot is very structured. It kind of uses more of like a formula. It's always the same amount of cards. And then there's these like archetypes and stuff. So, and in the, I mean, you could, it's like a lifetime study if you want to go that deep into the tarot. It goes very deep with the imagery and the symbolism and stuff. Um, I'm not going to be a lifetime student of tarot, but I will at some point get to know the different suits and stuff a little bit more. These are the two that I have. This is Danielle Noel again, the one that just did the Oracle, the Ocean Dreams one. And she has a shadow one, which I thought is cool because it's a little bit more like introspective, whereas this is a little bit like lighter and fluffier, more inspirational. And this is more like if you want to do a more deep dive into the psyche and stuff. So this is a newer deck, but they're both tarot decks, one kind of showing the light, one showing the dark. And then I also have a copy of the like classic tarot deck that my sister gave me, but I haven't used it yet. And um and then I have a book. This is Danielle Noel's The Book of Tarot. I started kind of reading it, but it's kind of one of those things you really have to focus on and kind of digest the material. So it's just not something I've wanted to do a huge deep dive into. I was kind of dipping my toes a little. All right, so now that I've just shown you my collection and talked a little bit about them, I'll talk about my kind of process. And it's very it's very much in like an individual thing. Everyone practices a little differently. For me, I'll tell you kind of the foundation of how I set up. So if someone were to reach out to me, if I were to do a reading for myself, or if someone were to reach out to me and say, "Hey, can I get an oracle reading for you or an intuitive reading for you?" If I'm using cards, first thing I do, like we do at every training, I ground first. I ground back into my body because that's when you can cut out the noise of the ego mind and sink in and receive more intuitive information, inspiration, those nudges that I get. This is how I do it. I have to get out of my mind and sink into my body. So I do a little bit of a meditation. I do some breath work, hand over the heart, and when I go into meditation, I do a visualization. First, I ground into the earth like I'm creating roots from like my sits bone, my tailbone down into the earth, grounding, kind of wrapping around the core of the earth. But I also, not only am I kind of like grounding down into the earth, I visualize also um, bringing earth energy up into my body. And then once that earth energy is coming up, that very grounding, nourishing energy that makes me feel stable, I also then visualize connecting with the the universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, whatever your version is, if you subscribe to that. And for me, that is through my crown chakra, through the top of my head. So I almost picture like a cloud above me with this like infinite, beautiful energy that we all come from and we all go back to. And I visualize it as like white light coming down through the crown of my head, down through like third eye and throat down into my heart. And I imagine both meeting at my heart and kind of swirling so that I have both that inspiration and that grounding energy. So I don't feel, 'cause sometimes I feel a little bit, the best way to describe it is my mentor calls it airy fairy. I get a little like kind of, you could almost describe it. It depends on how you experience anxiety, but when you kind of feel a little almost lightheaded, maybe not dizzy, but I just call it airy fairy. Like your head just feels a little spinny. That's why I make sure I ground. And then when I feel like I have a good mix of just allowing the intuitive flow or however you want to describe that, along with feeling grounded, then that's when I do like a little bit of a prayer. I set the intention first by inviting anyone from my spirit team. So that could be like angels, guardian angels, spirit guides, ancestors, past ones or loved ones who have passed away. Anything along that in that kind of realm that you subscribe to, I welcome them in, and I set the intention that the information come from the place of highest good, most amount of healing, and nothing other than that, right? It's I only want to be supported from that place. And I also ask that if I'm doing a reading for someone else, I ask that the wisdom that comes through the cards or anything that I feel intuitively as I'm pulling the cards and kind of interpreting them, that it be provided for this person's um greatest amount of heal like highest good, greatest amount of healing. And if I'm working for someone else, I can also invite their team in. So it's like a collaboration on behalf of them. I also I also ask, especially if am collaborating with someone, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to do this on my own time. But if there's a question that you have, ask it quietly to yourself. I don't want to know because the less I know, the more magical it is when the answers come in and they match up really neatly. And I say, just set your intention. What do you need guidance on? And sometimes it may not, the guidance that comes through may not be exactly what you asked for, but because I've set the intention that it's the highest good, most amount of healing, is what your soul needs to hear the most. Because sometimes what we ask for is more from like a wounded ego want, right? And maybe not what our soul needs the most and what is for the highest good. I know that's happened for me. Sometimes, like, I get that kick in the ass where I'm like, oh, okay, I know. Like, it wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it's what I needed to hear. And so I set that intention, always the highest good, most amount of healing. And I ask that if this person has set an intention, or if I'm setting my own, that the information, the wisdom in the cards help to provide clarity, guidance, support for whatever has been on this person's heart or mind, and just help them to lead them through whatever season that they're having in their life. And and then I release it. I fully release and surrender that whatever information comes through on the cards or whatever intuitive practice that I'm doing outside of that or with the cards, that it'll be for them. And so far, it always has. It's always wowed whoever I'm working with as well as myself. And I think when we set these intentions, that it can only be loving, right? Especially when we're using these beautiful cards that have these loving messages. The other thing that I do right before I invite kind of my team or whoever I believe in is I take a big deep breath and I blow it out like more like and I envision a bubble of like protection and light that surrounds me so that I feel protected. I then invite who I want to come into this nourishing, healing space. And then at the end, I close that bubble. I shrink it. I say, thank you for working with me today. You're free to go about what you're doing. And I think that with these types of practices, from what I've learned, it's important to open and close your practice with intention. There are those, and I'm kind of on that wavelength too, that some people will compare doing these. It doesn't matter kind of if it's a deck or like a pendulum. They call them, um, why am I blanking right now? Oh, divination tools. You can compare that to a Ouija board, right? I know there's a lot of like stigma, and you can call it a spirit board, Ouija board, whatever. But the idea is the same. You're kind of like you're connecting with another realm. So the way that I've been taught is just protect yourself, set the intention. It's only loving. There's only good things that can come through. And then close your practice after with gratitude. So I think that's just a good way to operate. I think it's ethical. And then you don't have to worry about anything weird happening. You don't have to feel exhausted after if you don't like close the practice and have those boundaries. That's kind of the biggest thing in this. If we're getting weird and talking about this stuff, and that's really what it is. The closer practice is to set those boundaries of like, okay, now I'm finished working. Thank you for your help. We'll hang out again soon. Um, that's kind of the bread and butter. Then I do kind of do a visualization with my cards. You can do it with physical, um, like for me, this is very much of like an energetic practice too. If I'm doing a reading for myself and then doing a reading for someone else, my belief is that when I'm setting an intention to work with this deck for myself, I've put my energy into it. So then if I were to like do a reading for someone else, I want to clear that energy first, kind of clean slate it. And there's different ways to do it. You can like visualize literally like it being, if you can imagine like your own energy around it, you can imagine it like a vacuum sucking it all up and it's clean, and then you're putting someone else's in, like this is for this person, and setting that intention for them. You can use physical things. You could smudge it, so burn some sage or palo santo. One thing I will say about palo santo is I learned that it's not a sustainable product. It's hard to source. So I do have a couple sticks that I bought when I didn't know that. I no longer buy it. I buy like locally sourced sage, and just to be more sustainable. Also, so you could kind of like you basically you're clearing it with smoke of some sort. You could use like a spray. So I have like an intention spray. I bought this locally in Sarnia, and I just spray it. So then I run it through the mist. You can you can like tap it on a, you can use sound as a vibration to clear it. These are just kind of different ways that people will clear their decks. Um, I also learned through Kyle Gray, because he's like the angel guy. So he talks about different archangels. So what he uses for himself, I also use for myself, but I use it for my decks. He talks about Archangel Metatron and how essentially I use Archangel Metatron to clear my space, my either my energetic field or the energetic field of the deck. I say, thank you, Archangel Metatron, for clearing my energetic space. And I imagine like him like vacuuming it up, essentially, just kind of like taking it all from me, giving me a clean slate. And then I use Archangel Raphael, who's the archangel of healing and safe travels. I say thank you, Archangel Raphael, for surrounding me with a layer of healing. And his color is green. So then I visualize a layer of green wrapping around me, or the cards. And then I say thank you, Archangel Michael, who's like the king of the archangels. And I say thank you for Archangel Michael for surrounding me with a layer of protection. And his color is, I see it as blue. Um, gold might be another one. I'd have to double check, and it's different. It's individual for everyone, right? You kind of build those intuitive senses, but for me, I then imagine and visualize this layer of like blue, just as like kind of veiling over me and protecting me. And that's how I kind of set things up when I'm starting to work. So I set that, I clear everything, set my intentions, healing, protection, um, bring my people in, set the intention highest good, most amount of healing, and that the wisdom help with whatever's, whatever question I have or what's on that the heart and mind of whoever I'm working with or for. Um, for me, when it actually comes to working with the cards, I just shuffle until I also set the intention that I just shuffle and a card will either flip over in the deck or it falls out. So I set the intention that, okay, so for whatever's on their mind or whatever particular question, I also get a sense of like how many cards do I need to pull. And I usually see a number in my head. If I close my eyes, I'll see like a three. I know I need three cards. So I set the intention of like, okay, I'm going to do three cards, whatever their question is. This is going to provide guidance for them for their highest good, most amount of healing. And the way that these cards will be selected. So it's like I'm saying it out loud to no one, but also like just my own belief system of who I feel I'm working with. The card will either flip over or fall out of the deck. I trust that those are the cards I need to work with. And then the first three, either flip over or fall out, are the cards that I use, and I use them in order. If I'm doing a specific framework, I'm doing like a 5 card spread, and each one has a specific question or needs an answer to a specific question, I'll say it out loud. Okay, card number one is for this, card number two is for this, card number three, and so on. And I say, and the cards will come out that, so the first card to fall out will be for this. And I'm in a bit of a dialogue with my intention of it will be laid out, and then I just trust that the cards that fall out will be for those things, and I set it up that way. You can use the books if you want to. Sometimes I do, especially if I'm building my kind of relationship with the deck and getting to kind of know it and how I feel about it and what the cards mean to me. But eventually I just know what the card means, and if I need to sink in deeper, ask questions, I can kind of do that at that time. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. And then at the end I thank I just say thank you for the support and working with me to do this work, and I look forward to the next time. And then I kind of close off. I imagine my energetic field kind of sinking back in, becoming my own again. It's like closing the door, turning off the open sign of your business, right? I just see it as energetically doing that and like locking the door. We're closed for the night kind of thing, or for the rest of the day or whatever till the next session. And then that's it. Then I provide the information and I send it off, and I release any expectations really. It is a wonderful practice for me of really like surrendering and release, because I can get into my head about it sometimes of like, I so like this has to be the right answer for them or whatever. It has to resonate. It doesn't always have to. I've had things where it doesn't make sense at the time, it makes sense down the road. So I would recommend, if you are doing a reading as a like as a regular practice, or even when you do, write them down and write maybe what it means to you. And so that you actually have that frame of reference to come back to, because it might not make sense in the moment, but it could 3, 6, 9, a year down the road, you could look back and be like, oh my God, I've had times where I've journaled out stuff that like did not make sense at the time. And it turned out like it came true the way that I wrote it out, when it didn't seem like there was any way possible. Um, what else? And if you receive a reading from someone, take notes, especially if they send you a recording that you can watch more than once. My own practice, I in the if it's a live one, then I'm just like in the moment with them. If they send me a recording, I like to watch it and just like take it in. see what I pick up intuitively from it, be fully present with it, and then I'll watch it again and I'll take notes. And then you know, again and again as much as I need to, right? But it's it's nice to do it like in full presence and see what you pick up intuitively without feeling like you have to take notes right away, and then just kind of sit and digest it, see how you feel about it, um, and then come back and jot some notes later, or then watch it again and take notes while you're listening. So there's different ways to kind of ingest and then digest the information or embody the information. So um, I think I covered it all. I went through my process, showed you all my decks. And yeah, so I do I'm happy to answer any questions. If you're watching this as like a replay or as a podcast episode, reach out to me. I do offer readings, so if it's something you want to do, reach out to me. Maybe one of these days I'll do more of like a workshop, maybe an interactive workshop, or I have had a couple nudges. It's just this isn't the time for me to do it with how work is. I have to be honest with myself. I get these inspirations and I want to like bring them out into the world right away, but I've been learning to kind of like slow down and say, well, is this actually the time? Because I get super excited about this stuff because I'm passionate, but am I actually honoring my energy, and would I be best serving you at this time to do it? No, not in this season of the summer and how busy work is. So this is something that I then jot down. I have a note in my phone that I jot down the little hints or hits that I get, the inspiration hits, so I can come back to it later and say, "What was that thing?" Or I'll just remember later. But I did get a hit to maybe do like an intuitive course, like intuitive development course. So perhaps it would have some card readings with it or something, and maybe we would practice on each other or whatever that looks like. We'll see how it kind of develops, but it's a little bit of a seed that's been planted, and we'll see when it's kind of ready to like come into fruition. But if you're listening to this or watching this, you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to chit chat about this and kind of doing it in an ethical way that feels safe for you, and especially if you're working with others. That's always kind of been my thing. So I'm going to end this recording and get back to my soul care hour for the last little bit. Take care, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye.